Well, here we are on podcast number 3 regarding RFID and commercial laundries. This episode's about, is RFID worth the investment? I'd like to welcome Isaac Hayes again. So Isaac, we'll start with you around, you recently wrote an article about RFID investment in commercial laundries, around the business case, what that looks like. So can you just talk us through the outline that you used in that
Sure.
article?
Yeah, so the article was, a bit tongue-in-cheek why you can't afford RFID. But essentially the case that I lay out there is sort of based on something that I've seen a lot of commercial laundries do over the last sort of decade or so in terms of what they're expecting out of RFID, and so generally the analogy that I use is, when it comes to something like introducing a tunnel washer to a laundry that doesn't have that at the moment, so they're running on washer extractors. They want to put in a tunnel washer because they're aware of the benefits that a tunnel washer will give them in terms of productivity, and they're sold by the tunnel washer vendor on how great it'll be, and they'll make all these savings on labour and efficiency and whatnot. But if you were to take a tunnel washer and just drop it in the middle of a laundry and not change anything else about the way that you were doing your operation on the floor, process flow, training, really spend a lot of time changing the way that you're managing operations on the floor around the tunnel, because the tunnel going in obviously becomes the thing that pushes everything else in terms of driving the flow in the plant. If you were to just drop it in there, do nothing, and then expect efficiency gains, obviously that'd be ludicrous. You need to do training. You need to change a lot of the layout of the plant. There is a lot, of groundwork that goes in to actually putting a tunnel in and getting those efficiency gains. The washer, the CBW on its own doesn't give you very much if you don't do all that groundwork. And so I sort of draw the parallel along with RFID. I think a lot of laundry operators have been sold on the benefits, and this is what it can provide, X, Y, Z, in terms of savings on linen spend and whatnot, which is true, but it seems like somewhere along the way there's become this expectation that it was just a capital investment. You put the hardware there, and then the hardware connects to some software, and that on its own will give you some sort of benefit, and it's just not the case. It is a big internal change management process that needs to happen, and a bit of a paradigm shift internally about the way that you think about managing your dispatch and receiving workflows, to ensure that the data that the RFID equipment is going to generate for you is accurate enough for you to then be able to get those benefits. And so, I find that drawing that parallel between the tunnel washer, which, everyone knows is obvious that you can't just drop in a bit of tunnel washer hardware and expect benefits from it, doesn't mean that the benefits aren't there. It just means that there is a lot of work that goes into moving the laundry over to those new processes enabled by the hardware, and it's very similar with RFID.
Yeah, so good points there, Isaac. So just to expand on that a bit, one of the sort of analogies that I draw from it is if you're doing a traditional business case in a business, commercial laundry, whatever, the example might be going from a single roll liner to a multi-roll liner, and you invest a couple of $100,000 of capital, but you expect increased productivity, reduced labour costs. With RFID, it's the intangible benefits that can only really be measured on a successful outcome of the implementation. And one of the common questions common bits of resistance that I've seen by operators that are dipping their toe in with RFID takes into the point that you just made, that it's not just buying the hardware, it's the process internally. And quite often operators have said to me, but it takes more time now for our dispatch people to push a trolley into a scanning cabinet, take it out and move it on. It takes more time to filter it. But I make the comment around, if you put a new operator on a towel folder, they're not going to get 600-800 towels per hour. It's a graph over time, a hockey stick over time. Once they get used to the system and the process, things become muscle memory, and they get quicker. And my experience with SBL in a large plant processing linen and dispatching linen with RFID, there was no significant increase in labour costs after the initial process is embedded into the business. So that's helpful. So the business, just summing up around that one, the business case has got to take into account the intangible benefits once it's successfully implemented. And let's just sort of bullet point some of those intangible benefits that we've seen fall out of a successful implementation of RFID.
Sure. So I think it depends. The intangible benefits, I suppose, depend on the focus and also the capabilities of the laundry. So if you've got RFID, obviously generates a lot of data. And so that's the first thing, is that you've got a lot more data on where your linen's going, where and depending on the processes that you put in place internally, things like rewash and rejects and whatnot can all start to be isolated at the individual sheet level. So you've sort of opened up yourself to be able to get very, very granular with what's happening on the floor and predicting trends and things like that. But it is very dependent on the software you're using and also the internal capabilities to sort of weed through a lot of that data. I feel like the big one that comes out of the box, if you've followed those processes and you're starting to scan out RFID, is automatic ordering is the obvious operational sort of benefit that doesn't require much data analysis or anything like that. It's just a new feature that you can offer your customers, is automatic ordering. And so it's one of those great ones because and maybe that's a tangible benefit, but it's one of those benefits where it's got an obvious benefit to the customer, is that they get to save time and money. They don't have their housekeepers going out and doing stock takes and ordering and things like that. But also what you've done is take control of the stock levels of that customer. You're no longer relying on their judgment to say, this is how much stock I need on site. And it really opens up that conversation for, no, actually, we know you do have this linen on site. You need to go check. We are 100% sure that you have your par level on site now. So you need to go and check, in various stock rooms and whatnot. Bit of friction early on, but it helps to start shape that conversation with the customer about stock levels and stock control, while still feeding it as an initial carrot and benefit to them, rather than just a...
But let me just sort of expand on that a little bit for anyone that's not 100% clear on what automatic ordering is. So rather than the customer place a web order, the RFID system counts in the soiled linen and automatically generates the order. So what soiled linen the customer sends back to the laundry gets scanned, registered, and automatically populates the order to go back to that customer. So rather than the customer, we talked, I think in the last episode, it was about the biggest negative with web ordering is that we pass the keys to the car to the customer. They take control of the amount of stock. We might buy 4 or 5 par, and it's interesting talking about a business case around RFID. If you do a business case on the capital that you invest to start a customer, that capital you invest in the business case isn't necessarily the capital that the customer takes to service them, because they start ordering above that initial capital outlay. And so this is where RFID, when I first entered the laundry game very long time ago, we actually used to count the linen in from each customer manually. Labour was a lot cheaper then, and linen was very expensive. Now linen is still expensive, but labour is more expensive, so it just automates that process and takes it out of it.
And it gives you that, you almost get like the benefits of having a dedicated stock or a COG stock customer.
Yeah.
They're very easy customers to manage in some ways compared to a pool, because it's just whatever they send in, that's what they get back. And the customers that are on that are used to that. And obviously you've got natural depletion and things, and you have those conversations, but it removes a lot of the stress on the laundry, saying, oh, we've got to run on the bank, so to speak, with our stock levels and whatnot. But the downsides of an actual dedicated is a reduced productivity through the tunnel, where you've got split loads or small loads and things like that. So you get to sort of get the benefits of a dedicated customer, but on your pool there.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, in a business case, generally the first thing that drops into a business case is the capital outlay. So in terms of buying hardware for a business that wants to convert to RFID, there's some clear aspects, and to me the first one is you need some way of scanning that linen to dispatch it. I've seen laundries that have dipped their toe in the water, so to speak, with RFID. They've got a small bench with a bench scanner or a handheld. They're trying to do it that way. They've got one customer they want to try on it. I'm not a fan of that from what I've seen for two reasons, but the main one is that it's not scalable. You might be able to get by with one small account. For this example, we'll just talk about a laundry that's roughly processing somewhere between 50 and 100 tonnes a week. And they want to start, and they've got one customer. They could scan it with a hand scanner or scan it on a bench. But the problem with that, just so people can clearly understand the distinction I'm trying to draw between starting off with the incorrect sort of foundation compared to starting off with the correct foundation. But by starting off with scanning benches and handheld scanners, one of the things that I've seen is the power levels have to be reduced in that equipment, so you're not picking up linen that's chipped that's around it. So you're just scanning exactly what you want. So the power levels are right down, which then makes that equipment very inefficient for scanning it. Whereas if you move to a scanning cabinet, standalone, if you wanted to dip your toe in the water or a new entrant to RFID, whether they be doing 100 tonnes a week or 10 tonnes a week or 500 tonnes a week, you need a scanning cabinet to scan it out. You put the trolley in there, you scan the whole trolley. Now, because it's contained within the cabinet, the readers and antennas can be turned up to 100% power output, and that cabinet then is part of the foundation for a scale up as the business grows and you want more customers. But I've sort of been in discussions with a couple of relatively smaller laundries that are looking to get into RFID, and my suggestion is they buy a cabinet, they scan it out in the cabinet, but they also can then scan it in the cabinet when it's one small customer. But then if they then want to get beyond that, the next move is to put in the dedicated soiled reader. So the cabinet's purely for shipping out to your clean linen, and the soiled linen is captured by the soiled in antennas. And so the foundation's right for scale up. Then you can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 to the whole laundry over time. So in terms of capital outlay in the business case, from my experience, it's been... we talked about this in the last few episodes about determining what success looks like for you very, very clearly before you even start. And if you've got a clear roadmap, that business case can be staged. It doesn't have to be, I have to spend $100,000 tomorrow to get into RFID. You can start small, you can scale up, but very, very important to select the right hardware at the outset. Otherwise, scaling up is nearly impossible, in my view, because you get the taste of success, but then you have to go and find massive amounts of capital to scale it up. So you can grow. In terms of cost, it's difficult in this type of environment to tell anyone what it would cost. But there's a few ways to approach it. From my perspective, I would start with a cabinet, retro chip some linen, which we talked about in the last episode. Chips are relatively cheap now. And heat seal them on other than toweling, which we discussed. So a bit of labour investment required in that in terms of retro chipping, but can be done very, very successful. But again, just that clear picture on the roadmap for your business, and your business will be different to the next person's business. What you deem as successful for you might be different to the next player. So, but anyway, we can assist people.
Can I jump in on that? Because I think it's a good point, and I agree with, if you had to pick one single bit of hardware, a trolley scanner or cabinet is probably the one, because you can sort of, you can do in and out on that, and even if you didn't have a bench top, you can throw a linen bag on the floor of a trolley cabinet and do some rejects or things like that. So that, in terms of being able to run a small deployment, if you had to pick one, trolley scanner would probably be the way to go. But I think too, when it comes to like the hardware and the capital outlay, I think it's easy to look at the scale of the laundry in its entirety and then start to get lost in the weeds in terms of why do we need this scanner, why do we need that one, and a lot of it and the suggestions that like I make and whatnot are based on understanding what problems are going to come down, like a year or 2 years down the road, and getting ahead of them based on experience. But the simplest way to think about it would be to start with, if you were going to do it on your own, start with a single trolley and invest the labour that's required to do it properly. So ensuring that every trolley that comes back is scanned and is scanned for a sufficient amount of time, to capture everything that's inside, and double checking, and same thing when it's going out, doing rejects, doing registrations all through that trolley. Only if you've sort of got that early commitment to, making sure it's done properly, would you realise the operational cost of labour to do that properly. And then some of the business cases for things like the dock door scanners or soil readers, and that start to make sense because they're very much aimed at solving specific problems in the RFID flow, I suppose. Which if you don't care that much about the data being accurate and you just sort of want to put it in and do a couple of scans and you don't really care that much, it's not going to look like that much of a benefit to you over just having a trolley scanner, right? Having dedicated readers in the soil area and dispatch cabinets and whatnot, and sort of putting it all. But if you tried to get as close to 100% accurate in and out on that one cabinet, you would start to see the value of that's why we want multiple read points, and that's why because So I think it comes down to a lot of the extra capital outlay and hardware that you see in a typical deployment. It becomes more obvious once you've really locked into making sure that you're getting that accuracy as high as possible.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I recently gave a talk at a seminar on RFID, and unidentified losses was the key topic of it. And I've been involved heavily with a private equity buyout of a large commercial laundry group, and it was interesting to me to see private equities look through their eyes at the amount of capital tied up in linen in a commercial laundry, and their expectation of return on investment, and their sort of venture into commercial laundries, their typical way of overlaying a business case and return on investment on an asset compared to a laundry's asset of linen, there was this huge gap in information, and that's the unaccounted losses. And we talked about that at length last time. Web ordering with unaccounted losses, what falls into that bucket is generally people think of stolen linen, but over-ordered linen falls into that same bucket. And one thing in a discussion recently, I was trying to explain to a customer the benefits of RFID giving that visibility to age stock at a customer's. And through that conversation, I started to realise that the best analogy is if a laundry, they know exactly who owes them money. They can pull up on their age debtors list who's paid me in 30 days, who hasn't paid me for 60, who hasn't paid me for 90. And RFID gives you that same visibility at the customer of, I've sent this linen out, I've charged you for it, it's sitting there in one transaction, but you can then see I haven't got that back into my laundry in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120. So it's very similar to an age debtor account for a customer, but without RFID, you that disappears totally. You have no visibility, and that's that unaccounted losses. And once we started to analyse the data that the RFID produced in terms of age stock at a customer, we then treated, and we talked about this at length last time, we then treated each customer individually because their linen profile, consumption profile was so different. Yet prior to RFID, they were just all in one bucket. They all looked the same, and there was no distinction between any customer, their linen use profile per customer. So, and that falls into that intangible benefits of this system. But until you see it, and this is where I think your point, Isaac, with doing it well with one customer first will be such an eye-opener in that aspect alone. There's a whole raft of other benefits of RFID, but that age profile on the linen sitting at the customer shelf does two things. But not only does it give them the visibility of it, it gives them confidence that their system is accurate, that this is the user at the laundry confident their data is accurate, and then they start to see the benefits of it. Yes, I know it's accurate because I've been scanning it in and out. I see the data. I see the age profile growing, and you do see it grow over time, and straight away you get this aha moment where now I understand how I can use this data to benefit my laundry and reduce the costs.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, now one of the other benefits, and it's very tangible, is the reduction in natural depletion, and that falls into that same bucket we were just talking about, where natural depletion, we replace linen in commercial laundries ongoing every month. We're injecting linen in, injecting it in. But now with RFID, you can see where it is, right? So, I get used to going shopping at the customer. Rather than buy linen, have a look at the age profile that all your customers are on RFID, go and get it back from the ones that aren't turning it over. They've overstocked that, and every laundry will know that every laundry that's doing web order will absolutely know their customers' orders aren't connected to their occupancy or their saw linen return. Sometimes it just ends up like a standard order. And so RFID gives you that benefit of reducing your capital outlay monthly on natural depletion, and I've seen up to 30% reduction.
I think on that point about the ordering, it might be worth talking about because it seems obvious sometimes, but you do hear it from laundry operators or like more often from those not familiar with the industry. Is, well, if the customer's ordering, we're getting money for that, right? So if they over order, who cares, because we're getting paid. But at the end of the day, the customer will only use linen based on their actual occupancy. That's what they're going to use.
Yeah.
So if they're over ordering, it's going to be one of two things is going to happen. Either over ordering because they're losing it, or using them for rags and throwing them in the bin or whatnot, so you're not going to get that stock back, in which case you've got cents on the dollar for your rental fee versus what that linen actually cost you. Or it's going into overstock them, and their orders will drop down even when their occupancy stays at the same level. So they've only used the same amount, but they've put that pressure on your production to give you everything at once, and then it sort of drops back down. Whereas what a laundry wants is a nice flat, sort of output for all the customers. Over the course of the year, and to reduce seasonality as much as possible. So I just thought it was worth touching on that point, because I have heard it raised before with, we'll let them order whatever they want, but generally doesn't work out very well.
Yeah. And one of the last 5 years, the growth in the short-term Airbnb, short-term accommodation market has been a huge issue, because there's been this explosion of contract cleaners servicing that sector, whether it be a mum and dad owned house that they've converted to an Airbnb, or, for example, I stayed on the Gold Coast a couple of weeks back. It was a very large, well-known group, but within that hotel, there's probably 200 rooms in it. Within that hotel, of 200 rooms, there was 80 that were short-term rentals that weren't managed by the hotel management. And so what happens, you've got contract cleaners going in there. Now, they can be taking on new customers. So you've got one contract cleaner is the laundry's customers, but the contract cleaner has got hundreds of customers. Now, they can win and lose customers with no visibility at the laundry, and that linen's gone. It turns into unaccounted losses, and it just turns up wherever. So again, RFID gives you visibility about the customer linen profile of that contract cleaner. You'll see this aged stock growing out of those contract cleaners, and they're probably what I call a serial offender. Just the nature of the business that they're doing. You'll see a short-term stay owner shopping around for a cheaper contract cleaner. And when they terminate their contract, the contract cleaner has no benefit to them or accountability to go and get the laundry's linen back from that customer. So they just say, yep, see you later, and the laundry's linen is sitting there for the next incumbent to use. And so that's a big problem. So again, RFID has resolved that problem, and Isaac, you played an intimate role in developing that in Australia with the Linen Hub system that you developed. So I think we've covered a lot of territory there, Isaac, so I think we might close this one down at this point. But in the next up-and-coming episode, we're talking about why RFID projects fail, and that's going to be a super interesting topic to a lot of people, because it touches on some of the points that we talked about today around the process and starting with the correct foundation.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Talk soon.